About Beer receives underwriting support from Allagash Brewing. They understand the importance of independent journalism in the beer space, and their support helps fund original work. Learn how you can affordably support journalists by visiting allaboutbeer.com/support.
Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl, and it's hard to imagine the American craft beer industry without Allagash Brewing Company. The Portland, Maine brewery has been a leader in quality, tradition, and community since it was founded 30 years ago. Rob Todd is here to look back on 3 decades of brewing white and what comes next. But first, I'm going to invite you to keep up with everything that's happening at All About Beer. And the best thing to do that is to follow us on social media. We're at All About Beer across all of the major platforms. And if you have comments, guest suggestions, or just want to reach out, you can always email me at johnholl@allaboutbeer.com. That's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. We're supported by you. Head over to allaboutbeer.com/support and learn how just a few bucks can have a huge impact in supporting original journalism in the beer space. And on that note, thanks to this episode's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Stomp Stickers. Stomp makes it easy for breweries to stock up on the essential packaging and promotional supplies all in one place. From beer labels and keg collars to coasters, beer boxes, and more, they've got you covered. Plus, every product is backed by their 100% satisfaction guarantee, and their full-time support squad is ready to help anytime. Visit stompstickers.com and use code THINKBEER for 15% off of your first order. If you're running a brewery, owner or operator, Beer 30 by The Fifth Ingredient is the ultimate command center. The most powerful brewery management software on the market, Beer 30 handles the entire brewing workflow from recipe development to production. Once your beer is brewed and ready, it seamlessly manages your inventory and streamlines your brewery's sales and distribution, all in the same easy-to-use platform. Beer 30 lets you get back to the beer and to the people that made you fall in love with this industry in the first place. And no other brewery management software gives you the ability to truly master your business and get the insights that you need to thrive in an increasingly competitive industry. Visit thefifthingredient.com/allaboutbeer today to learn more and receive 3 free months of Beer 30. I'm excited to have Rob Todd here this week, the founder of Allagash Brewing in Maine. He's been a leader in the craft industry since its founding 30 years ago. Countless drinkers had their palates expanded through white, and the award-winning wit beer that is synonymous with the brewery is a legend. He's a James Beard Award winner. He's a leader in the community and a thoughtful brewer who also understands the importance of the overall business and how to manage responsible growth. To mark the brewery's anniversary, he sat down with me on a recent morning via Zoom, beer in hand, to talk about the journey and what comes next. Here's our conversation. Rob, thanks for doing this. Thanks for putting time on your calendar to have this conversation.
That's my pleasure. Thank you for having us on.
I imagine that with the push towards the 30th anniversary, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I imagine that you've been kind of going back in your mind a little bit to some of those early days when you have big milestone 0 at the end number anniversaries. The mind tends to go back to some of those early days. Have you been doing that? Have you been taking walks through memory lane, or are you just too busy with everything that's ahead?
I think it's a little bit of a mix of both. And actually, I'm going to open a beer now. Even though
Look
we're
at
not
you.
doing video, I'm like,
I love that.
Actually, it's times like this that I do kind of go down memory lane, that I kind of relax with a beer to kind of take a sip now, even though it's 10 in the morning. But no, it's times like this when I can just kind of relax and chat about the past, that I'm able to get out of the moment. But I mean, as you're aware, and anyone that follows the craft beer business or even beer business is aware, it's a challenging landscape right now. And I think everyone really needs to be just like very engaged, in tune with everything that's going on. It's kind of an all hands on deck time. So I don't have a ton of time to kind of think about the old days, but every once in a while I will. And it's sometimes when we hit milestones because, or when I notice milestones. Like I was in the brewery 2 months ago, just on the weekend on a Saturday. I came in for a beer and I walked back in the production area because one of our brewers was taking some samples, which we of course have to do every day. And I started talking to him. Just about like the old days and the fact that it's 30 years. And I looked at our first tank, FV1, and I was like, huh, I wonder what the date stamp on that tank is. And, I kind of climbed up the leg of the tank and looked at the stamp, and it was, March 3rd, 1995. And this is probably back in February. I noticed that. I was like, whoa, like the 30th birthday of this tank is coming up. And it's times like that I think about, oh yeah, I remember like when that truck pulled up with that tank and, pulling I didn't have a forklift at the time, like pulling the tank off with an old chain fall I had attached to a column and like uncrating it. And then, me and a couple buddies that I enlisted stood it up with a chain fall and a block and tackle. So, every once in a while something will kind of stop me in my tracks, and I'll think about something. And we do like the milestones will keep coming up this year. My first test batch I think was this coming Tuesday, the 30th anniversary of that. So yeah, it's those times I can just kind of stop and think about how things were and how far we've come.
Was that first test batch, was that white?
It was. And in fact, that's all I brewed for almost the first year running the brewery, at least the first 6 or 8 months. I mean, it was really my plan. I just started very, very simple, had no employees. It was just me. I'd only been in the beer business a year or two, and I knew that I had a huge amount to learn. So, just in the interest of keeping things simple, my plan was start with one beer, draft only, local Portland market. I didn't self distribute. I went through a distributor. I just really tried to keep it simple. And that one beer I started with was Allagash White.
What did you base that business model on of just focusing on one? Because when I look to what the industry was like back then, people were trying, they had portfolios, they had a bunch of different beers. There wasn't necessarily just, I don't know if there was a lot of breweries in the US just focusing on one solid beer. So what was the, what was the business plan behind that or the thought behind that? Just do one thing well?
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting you mentioned that, and I think it's very much the case. Back then, there weren't many breweries that started with that, if any, really, aside from us, that started with that simple a portfolio. And I think that remains the case. I mean, there are definitely a couple breweries out there I know that are just doing maybe two beers or four beers, but I still don't know of anyone that just started with one beer and ran one beer for months and months. And it wasn't so much a business strategy from the perspective of, oh, we're going to have a ton of opportunity by just brewing one beer. It was more, I only had, when I actually started the brewery, or at least started building the brewery, I'd only been in the business for 1 year. And I was like
Right.
very self-aware that there was a lot I had to learn. So it was really more of a strategy to reduce risk. And it was a strategy to reduce risk because I felt like the more things I tried to tackle at once, the more that could potentially go wrong. But it was also a strategy, and we continue to employ this strategy. We and I, it's very important for me to do things right.
Mhm.
Sometimes with very limited means. In the old days, it was just a bunch of dairy equipment. So we didn't have the means to do what we do now from a quality and consistency perspective, of course, with the state of the art equipment we've been able to invest in. But it was just a matter of if I'm going to do this right, if I'm really going to optimize this beer, I'm going to need 100% of my focus going to just this beer. And that it worked out, I feel like, pretty well because I mean it took me a few months to get my arms around this beer. It's a tricky beer to brew. It really is. It's a unique beer.
Yeah.
There was no one doing it a beer like this at the time, which we can I'm sure talk about. But just by that intense focus just on doing one thing really, really well, we ended up, I feel like, doing it really, really well. I'm proud with how quickly we got our arms around quality with this one beer and consistency with this one beer. Again, especially given the limitations we had back in the old days.
I mean, everything that you're saying, I feel there's so many parallels to today to folks who are getting started and lessons that I hope they're picking up on and learning just when it comes to quality and consistency and working on perfecting something. I've been complaining about this for a while now, but there's a lot of lazy beer in the market these days, and I I don't know. I wish that when people were, I'm painting with a broad brush, but that there was that focus on doing it right and striving for something better each time. And when you think back to those early days, that first test batch of white, and then where it is now, would it be recognizable? Would that first test batch, do you think, still be recognizable to your palate with the beer you're having right now?
I mean, I still remember exactly how that first test batch tasted. It was a little bit heavy on the bitter orange peels. And I remember how the second batch tasted and the third, so here's how I usually answer that question is,
Yeah.
the beer today, the one I'm drinking right now, out of the 12-ounce can, it tastes exactly the way it did in 1995, 1996 when we got our start. If we were lucky enough to like get it right back then, and I probably only got it like really the way I envisioned it and wanted it. Maybe I mean 10 or 20% of the time I got it exactly the way I wanted it. And again, we were brewing on a bunch of dairy equipment back then, and I was, hand filling those old bung style kegs. I mean, it was just very, very cobbled together, used like rudimentary, unautomated equipment. So, I just didn't have the means to hit the quality and consistency standards that we have now. But every once in a while I did, and I knew it when I did, and it tastes the exact same today as it tasted like when I nailed it back then. But you fast forward to today, we nail it. I mean, we would. I mean, nothing's ever perfect, right? We're always seeing opportunity to improve, but we nail it. We nail it pretty darn consistently right now. I mean, I'm amazed at we've really. I get asked all the time, when you grow, doesn't quality go downhill? Well, no, it can certainly, but if you take that growth and invest it in things like quality, consistency, and of course we've invested it, invested. The value that's delivered from growth and other things that are very, very important and passionate to us, like our philanthropy program, treating our employees well with robust employee benefits, work with the community and quality equipment. And I was out on the packaging line just yesterday, and we were running bottles, and I was walking by a DO, a dissolved oxygen meter on the way into the line, and we were at 3.6 parts per billion of oxygen going into that machine, which is like unbelievably low. Like it's starting to get towards the threshold where it's impossible to get it any lower. And, it's also at those times that I look at, wow, we have come a long way. And, I don't look at it so much as, wow, we've accomplished so much because we're now making over 100,000 barrels a year. I don't think about that much, but I do look at something like that as a huge accomplishment. If we're able to deliver that level of quality, to me, like I get very excited about that, and it's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, and it's also just kind of fun to geek out on that kind of stuff, to be working towards getting those numbers so low. Um,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
it's like
I mean,
a tangible thing that you can point to, because I mean so much of beer, especially when it comes to taste or sensory and everything, it's sort of it's a personal thing, or it's a sometimes like grabbing smoke. So it's fun to be able to see those numbers, I imagine.
it is, and I still spend a ton of time. I mean, I don't come in and put my boots on and brew every day, but I do spend a ton of time walking around on the floor, just engaging with our crew, looking in tanks, looking at what the meters say. And yeah, when I see something like that, and you know what? Honestly, I got excited about it and went in the lab, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's like that all the time, pretty much now." And I'm like, "Wow, that's pretty cool."
You touched on a few of these things that I imagine would come up to the top of your mind, but when you think about that day and the tank delivery and having some buddies take it off the truck with you, and setting it up, and that sense of pride, that sense of accomplishment, um, and now 30 years later, with everything that you have going on and 100,000 plus barrels, um, what's another recent sense of accomplishment that you've had that's sort of similar to, you know, first tank being unloaded and now something more current, more recent, but in that same vein?
Yeah, it's kind of Uh, it really is kind of all over the map for me. I mean, another recent one, I was finishing my day Friday, and there was a group in our tasting room from an organization called In Her Presence, which supports immigrant women in the Portland area with things like a lot of the people that arrive in Portland, English might only be their maybe second language, maybe third language. So this organization does a lot of good with arming these people with tools that enable them to be successful and thrive in the community. And they were here in the tasting room, and I went down and said hi to Claudette, the director of the organization, and she was just like profusely thanking me for like all the support with their organization, all the support with other organizations she's familiar with in the community. And so that's another time where I'm just like, wow, like I never thought in a million years when I started that we would be able to, I never thought we'd have the means or the resources to contribute. I would have loved it if I thought the possibility was there, but I just never thought we'd have those kinds of resources to contribute in ways like that. So, yeah, those are definitely the times where I do kind of just stop and think about just how much our team has accomplished over the years. And it's not just me. There are 130 employees here, and really no one just shows up to work and punches in and does the minimum and punches out. Like everyone here is just so engaged and passionate about what we do. And it's not just brewing beer. I mean, our purpose is brew with integrity and build community. And
You have it
everyone
written on the
here.
wall at the brewery. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. We do because we want to continually remind ourselves that that's why we come into work every day. So, like everything we do when we make beer, we want to do it with integrity and build community. It's equally important. And as I mentioned, we've been able to reinvest the success from the growth to make us stronger with things like building community, volunteering in the community, contributions to the community. So, just general support for the community that's been there for us for 30 years.
Yeah. Um, you brought something up to mind when you were talking about the DO levels, but uh, that it was a run of bottles, and in 2025, there's not a lot of breweries still doing bottles, or at least in the craft space. Cans, obviously, I know you all are doing those now, but How much of the production is still in bottles?
I mean, it's a good chunk. I mean, over the last 5 years, of course, like pretty much every other brewery, it is declining in terms of its share, bottles versus cans. But right now our general breakdown is half draft, which is quite heavily weighted in it, for a brewery our size. But we're half draft, half package, and out of our package, we're 2/3 cans, 1/3 bottles. So, I mean,
Huh.
if you do the math, we're still selling 15,000 barrels a year of bottles. And it's continues to be a strong channel of our portfolio. So we have no plans to move away from that in the near
Oh,
term.
I would hope not. I mean, I still enjoy the bottle. Like, there's something nice about Allagash White in cans, but I don't know. I came up drinking it out of the bottle, and there's just something about still having that package around that is. It's not even nostalgic. It just feels right. When I'm drinking it personally. And you mentioned before, the challenging times right now. Being in glass has to help a little bit with a lot of the tariff talk with aluminum.
It
Is that
is.
fair?
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you what, it is. It's confusing to try to anticipate what's going to get affected by tariffs and to what extent. And our 12-ounce glass bottles, they're made by a U.S. company, Owens, Illinois, but they're actually made up in Montreal.
Oh
So
man.
we thought those would be subject to tariffs, but they're not. For some reason, those are carved out. Our cans are made stateside with by Ball. They're buying their aluminum sheet stateside, but because the raw materials for that aluminum sheet are imported, tariffs are hitting us on cans.
Yeah.
So it's pretty difficult to predict and it's difficult to unwind.
That that tracks. Um, so when you were talking about the challenging times right now, I mean, 30 years, you've seen a lot happen within your own walls. You've seen a lot happen within the industry. You've been a longstanding leader in the industry. People look to you for guidance. When you say, things are challenging right now, the tariff aside, what comes to mind when you say that? And what are you thinking about with the larger industry right now?
I mean, overall, I've got confidence in beer. Beer's been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, depending on which historian you ask. Um, so, I'm confident in beer overall and beer's longevity. But, everything in life comes in waves, right? I mean, I've been doing this long enough. I've been in the business for 30 years. There's certainly people in the industry now who've been around, in it a lot longer than I have. But I've even seen cycles in that amount of time. I started in 93 when craft beer, even though it had a very, very small market share, it was growing like strong double digits year over year. And then it went through kind of a period of languishing from maybe around 95 to 2005. And then it, took off like a rocket ship. And um, now we're back in a period of challenge. So, I'm confident we'll get back to a period of growth. But yeah, I mean, you look at what headwinds are out there for craft beer, and it's kind of like what isn't a headwind right now. I mean, the THC industry, which didn't seem like a huge threat 3 or 4 years ago when you could only buy it at specific stores that only sold, THC beverages. But
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, it just seems like in the last couple of years with the advent of the Delta 9 products, which aren't regulated, essentially, they're very, very widely available. And in a lot of states now, you can buy it. You can buy the Delta 9 derived THC beverages in the cooler right next to the beer cooler. So there's no question that's competing with beer. The economy certainly isn't helping. People, they don't have the discretionary cash that they had, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. That's having an impact. We all knew, I've been talking about this for years at the brewery and forums like all staff meetings. You can't go from, I forget how many breweries there were when I started, maybe 3 or 4 or 500. You can't just eternally be adding 1,000, a couple hundred to 1,000 breweries a year without a maturation phase in the industry. And I think we're seeing that now that we're in the 10,000 range for breweries. So, and then of course, beer overall, as craft has matured to the point where the overall beer industry trends are going to have an impact on it. It's not as insulated. So, all of those things stacked up, it makes for a pretty tough landscape right now. But I'm actually very, very confident in how we're positioned in that landscape. We've got a very focused portfolio that it really does go back to day one. 80% of our over 80% of our volume is Allagash White, and that's what distributors and retailers want now. They want focus. They don't want a long tail. They want a beer that is that is known, that's going to deliver efficiency, that's going to turn, and they've got that in Allagash White. So I'm very confident with how we're positioned given all the headwinds in the industry right now.
And some of the seasonals that you all have put out, Haunted House is just so much fun. It's one of the very few seasonals that I look forward to now, almost in the same level of like Sierra Celebration, just because it's so different from everything else that's on the shelves that time of year. But I know you've done Beach House and some of the Ski House and some of the other seasonals, and then the lager as well. And then I want to sort of talk about the Wild program in a second, but some of those seasonals and then the lager and even triple as well. When folks know you for primarily the one beer, white, have there been challenges to get them to try your other beers
Well,
and
for
then maybe
this,
keep coming back to it?
I mean, you never know how things are going to go these days, right? When you roll out a new beer, there's so much out there, and brand life cycles just have gotten progressively shorter over the years. But it certainly hasn't been a problem getting people to try those new seasonals. That's been much more successful than we anticipated.
Huh.
Um, I mean,
How so?
what's that?
How so?
We're just selling more than we thought, and it's the first year-round seasonal we've ever done. So we've done for years, over 25 years, we've done small batch releases of beers. Excuse me. We've done small batch releases of beers, but those releases, it's tough to earn yourself placement on a supermarket shelf with those releases. You really need something that can occupy that space year round to be in that space in a meaningful way. So this year round seasonal, we're carving out a spot year round in the C-store channels, the supermarket channels. And we took a little bit of a different approach with the branding on that beer. It's kind of fun and playful. It's a little bit, you can definitely tell when the Surf House is sitting next to the White. Oh, that's an Allagash beer. But
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a different feel. It's a kind of a different occasion. It's kind of a playful, whimsical scene on each of those. And I think people have really embraced that. And we're very happy with it and with the styles, and the styles have been very well received. I mean, you mentioned Haunted House. It's about a 6.5%. We call it a Belgian style stout, which isn't necessarily a accepted known category, but it's kind of fun and different. And that's in for a short window right around Halloween. Ski House it just went great, and that's a high ABV wheat beer. It's around a 7% wheat beer, very subtly spiced with ginger. We don't say ginger on the label because it is subtle, but you can pick it up. And then the Surf House, which we're just rolling out now, which right behind the winter seasonal Ski House. This will be the first year we're cycling against releases, but orders have been really, really strong, and it's absolutely a departure from something like an Allagash White. Much different beer style. It's a nice dry lager with a really kind of interesting complex like citrusy hop nose to it. So it's just that line's done really, really well, and it's exceeded our projections and expectations from a sales perspective.
Huh. I guess the opposite side of that is the Wild program.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I
Yeah.
I mean, I had the opportunity to be up at the brewery a couple weeks ago, I guess a couple months ago now at this point, and I was walking around with Jason in the new, you call it the cellars.
Yep.
And which, I mean, I've been in that space a bunch of times, but like what you've done with it, and it's I'm sure for the folks who are doing that tasting program when you go through, um, it's a lot of fun and very intimate, and you get to taste the beers, where they fermented out, and it feels very like old school craft in a fun educational way. But he was saying that really outside of those four walls, it's tough to get those beers because nobody wants them on the shelf anymore, store wise. And I mean that broke my heart, just because these beers I think were important to so many people for so long, and that the world has changed, where it's just they're languishing and they shouldn't be. But what was that decision like to pull back on distro for some of those beers?
Wasn't like, well, I'll put it this way. We really work hard to ensure anything we ask our wholesalers to bring into their warehouse, get behind, anything we ask our retailers to get behind. We want to make sure it's something that's going to be productive, efficient, like value added for them. And as we started to see kind of the waning of interest among beer drinkers in that category, we started to shift more to things like the seasonal, to things like the lager, which we're really pumped about that we just rolled out, to things like our variety pack. We just feel like those items are going to deliver a lot more value to our wholesaler customers, our retailer customers, and ultimately beer drinkers. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of been, sad in some ways, to see the popularity of those styles of beers wane. That being said, we've really built the on-site like presence of those beers. You mentioned that program over in the cellars. We do a really cool curated tasting experience that walks visitors through our history and walks visitors through a lot of like artisanal beer, especially Belgian style beer making techniques that involve wild yeasts and bacterias and spontaneous fermentations and barrel aging and the effects of different kinds of barrels. And those beers for us on site have actually really grown in popularity. So it's been pretty impactful how much sales right here on site of those beers have offset. I mean, it hasn't completely offset, a 20-state footprint of
Right.
selling those beers, but it's absolutely allowed us to continue to make those beers, which are a really, really small chunk overall of our sales volume, but they're a really big chunk of our culture, just that culture of innovation. I mean, that culture of innovation goes back to day one, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to make a Belgian style wheat beer. It was really important for me to give people a unique experience with beer. but to do it with a beer that was really like sessionable and drinkable and approachable. And that's why I gravitated towards Allagash White. But just that culture of innovation, that beer program continues to be a very important part of that. And we're going to keep innovating. We have a really cool program here. Jason might have showed you. It's a little 10-barrel system, and anyone at the company, if they want to, if they're interested in a style or want to propose a style, they can go to the pilot brewing team, suggest a beer, suggest a recipe, and work with that team to brew it on this little 10-gallon system. And we're literally brewing 100 unique beer recipes a year on that system. And we've been doing it for years and years and years. So we've literally got like hundreds of unique recipes. And it's really like those recipes have gone a long way to fueling a lot of innovation, like that seasonal series we were talking about. Like those beers come out of that program.
I like that. I want to jump back though quickly on some of like the cool ship beers and some of the spontaneous and these long turns in wood, these beers that I think inspired so many folks early on and brought flavors to the glass that were shocking and exciting and careful and just I think it spoke so much of what the beer industry, the promise of the beer industry maybe 20 years ago. I remember getting some of those bottles and bringing them to bottle shares before I started writing about beer, and just excited to share them and everything. When the wholesalers aren't interested in those types of beers, and it's great that folks are drinking it on premise and hanging out at the brewery doing it. Is the industry at large losing innovation or losing something when these beers are not quite as, I don't know, available, or not getting the time that maybe they used to? Like, are we losing something here?
I haven't thought about it so much from that perspective. Um, and I think, to some degree, it's because I still, at least, I'm seeing here, people are still discovering those beers. I think, maybe it's just moving to different venues. Uh, it's funny, just last week I was at an event. The local Chamber of Commerce does an event for younger members of the chamber in the community every couple of weeks here in that space that you visited. And there was a guy there. He's probably 24 years old, and he got up at the mic. He was working with a charitable partner that the chamber was supporting that day, and he said, "Oh, I'm just trying Allagash. I've been drinking beer for 4 or so years, and I'm just trying Allagash White for the first time." And I'm like, "You never had Allagash White? You grew up in Maine." So there are just still a ton of people out there who still haven't experienced these beers, and it still remains the case with these spontaneously fermented beers and barrel aged beers that we're introducing people to in that space with that Cellar's kind of curated tasting program. So we continue to introduce people to those beers. They're not as widely available at the time, but at this time, but I mean, who knows? Everything comes in waves, right? Or things often come in waves. So maybe there's a time 10 years from now where, as things kind of shake out and rationalize in the beer space on the shelf, maybe there's a reemergence of some of those. I don't think you'll maybe see shelves and shelves and shelves of them like we did before. But, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe the ones that really have staying power, the ones that are just very like quality driven and quality focused, maybe those earn their way back to the shelf, and the customer not only has access to those beers, but the ones that are up there on the shelf, they've got confidence that anything they buy is going to be very high quality.
Um, Speaking of availability, Talk to me about going into New Shea Stadium to City Field where the Mets play in Queens. This is that seems like that's one of those big exciting moments in the brewery history.
There's no doubt about it. We are so excited about that. And,
Are
you
you a
know,
Mets fan?
what's that?
Are you a Mets fan?
I'm not a huge baseball fan.
Okay.
But I grew up outside of Boston, so
Okay.
I guess if I was a fan of any team, it would be the Red Sox, just
I,
because
I was
that's
I
kind
was
of
I, yeah, I was trying to figure out where this Queens connection came from.
yeah, that's what I'm steeped in. But we feel like we have a lot of opportunity, and like number one, we sell a ton of beer in that area, and then especially the New York five boroughs area. That's one of our most deeply distributed areas. We've got a great relationship with our partner Union Beer, our distributor in that market, and it's just a really, really strong market and has been for quite some time. And I think, there's a lot of Mets fans that live out towards Long Island and on Long Island, and we're relatively undeveloped out there. And, I think this could be a huge opportunity to introduce a lot of people from that part of New York, where I feel like we've got a lot of opportunity to our beer and our brand and our experience. But yeah, you mentioned exciting. Like I'm very, very excited about that. It's definitely a first for us. Um, and it kind of gets back to what I just mentioned about that the guy at that Chamber of Commerce event, he'd never tried our beer. I think we're going to have a lot of people in that stadium who've just never tried Allagash White, who are going to experience it for the first time. So we're really looking forward to that. And, we got a lot of other cool projects going on. We've partnered with a local soccer, football
Oh,
team
Hearts of
in
Pine,
Portland,
yeah.
Maine. Yeah, Hearts of Pine. They're a startup. So, these are two pretty significant sports team partnerships. And again, to us, it's just an opportunity to give people the Allagash experience who have maybe never had it before.
I like that. Um, as we start to wrap up here, I want to bring you back to that those early days and sort of, we were talking about that first test batch and then the one that you're drinking now. When you drink an Allagash White, are you ever able to just enjoy it in the moment, or are you always looking for maybe not improvements, but you know, does your brewer brain switch off when you're able to have one of those beers?
That's a good question. Yeah, because it's funny. This actually brings me back to July 1st of 1995 because I had I brewed two test batches. There were some issues with that. I wasn't happy enough with it. The third batch I was feeling good about, and I kegged, brought it over to our distributor partner here in Maine, Nappy Distributors. They're our very first distributor. Been an amazing partner for us for 30 years. Um, and the first keg went on tap at the Great Lost Bear. And, my plan was to go in there and like just sit and have a few pints and kind of consider it done. Like, great, I've started the brewery, I built the brewery, I got a beer launched, and kind of my work is done in a lot of respects. And I remember I had a pint and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have another pint. I had another pint, and about halfway through that other pint, I'm like, I got to get back to work. I got to get back to work. So I finished the other pint. I went right back to the brewery and just like kept working. So I don't know. There's always that like tension for me. Yeah, there's absolutely times when I can really kind of sit back and like unplug and enjoy that beer and the experience of the beer for what it is. Um, but there's always that part of me that's just on all the time. Like, it just gets my gears turning. Like, what can we do better? What can we do different? How can we be more sustainable? How can we, engage more with the community? Um, just what's next? It's hard. I'm always in those two camps. So just sitting down and enjoying the beer, but thinking like, what can we do better? What's next?
I like that. Um, so on this particular podcast, I've been asking folks for quite a while now, what we call the green door question. And the premise is at the early start of the pandemic, when things seemed really bleak, my wife and I started to rewatch the television show The Good Place. And in the final season, they introduce a concept of a green door where the characters can walk through it and be anywhere doing whatever they want to be doing. And so if we had or have a green door on our plane of existence and this conversation ended and you could walk through it and be in any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Who would you want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
I think and this is just like what comes right to my mind, but I mean, there are so many, but to me, and I've actually got two of his posters on the wall, Dodola Brewing in Belgium, in Ace in Belgium. Just an amazing place. I mean, there's so much history there. Chris brews on a, I think it's 100+ year old, it's at least 100-year-old system with an old cast iron lauter tun. I mean, just the history and that brewery, it went through World War One in a really, really impactful way, and it went through World War Two, and Chris has been making beer there since I believe 1980. Just the history and tradition, and of course our roots are in the Belgian brewing tradition, and it's maybe my favorite place in the world to just relax in front of the fire and drink beer there. Um, as far as who I'd want to be drinking with. Yeah, maybe relaxing with my family. I haven't had enough time to relax with my family over the last 30 years. So maybe my wife and two daughters. And I have brought my wife there. I brought my older daughter there. I'd love to bring my younger daughter there, but I think that would be a great experience just to sit with them, and I very well could have the opportunity to do that in the not too distant future. So.
I
Yeah, I
like
think
that.
that's what I would choose.
I like that. Um, well, actually, when you were talking about the doll, it reminded me of, and I had to look this up as I was talking. Your favorite place to go, but there's a brewery in Rhode Island that has a wanted poster of you up on the wall.
Heard about that.
And if you ever walked into Buttonwoods, it would be they want to share all of their saisons with you.
Oh, well, I've heard about that brewery. I'm going to make it a point of stopping in there. What town are they in?
They're in Providence.
Oh, they're right in Providence.
Yeah, so
Okay.
as you're headed down 95 to go catch a Mets game,
Maybe I'll stop in there.
yeah, it's yeah, Buttonwoods. It's hanging up on their wall. It's a very flattering photo of you. In branded Allagash clothing, and then another where you have a very serious beer face on as you're nosing a glass of presumably saison. So
Oh, that's funny.
uh,
Well,
yeah,
uh, I have heard that. Thanks for reminding me it's there, and I'm gonna pop in there and check it out soon.
yeah, you'll blow their minds. It'll be great. Hey, thanks for doing this, and congratulations on 30 years. Thanks for introducing great beer to people for so long and continuing that fight and being a cool voice in the industry that people should be sitting up and listening to. But really, congrats on everything to you and the 130 plus colleagues of yours. It's been a hell of a run, and it's from a journalistic standpoint, it's a lot of fun to cover. So keep it up. Thank you.
Well, I sure appreciate it, John. Thank you. And if you could see me, you'd see me lifting a can of beer saying cheers. Yeah, here's to 30 more years.
If you're like me, after listening to that conversation, you're searching for your nearest Allagash White, and I fully support that decision. Meanwhile, go visit allaboutbeer.com and you can check out new content as well as the archives, which go all the way back to 1979. And remember, you can always reach me anytime via email at johnholl@allaboutbeer.com. That's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. We're also on social media at All About Beer. And before we run, here is a word from this week's sponsors. Stomp Stickers isn't just a website. It's your custom printing partner with over 30 years of expertise. Their support squad is ready to help by phone, chat, or email. Combining top-notch customer service with a super easy-to-use site, they're all about making sure you get exactly what you need, fast. Shop with confidence thanks to their 100% satisfaction guarantee. Visit stompstickers.com and use code ThinkBeer for 15% off of your first order. If you're running a brewery, owner or operator, Beer 30 by the Fifth Ingredient is the ultimate command center. The most powerful brewery management software on the market, Beer 30 handles the entire brewing workflow from recipe development to production. Once your beer is brewed and ready, it seamlessly manages your inventory and streamlines your brewery's sales and distribution, all in the same easy-to-use platform. Beer 30 lets you get back to the beer and to the people that made you fall in love with this industry in the first place. And no other brewery management software gives you the ability to truly master your business and get the insights that you need to thrive in an increasingly competitive industry. Visit thefifthingredient.com/allaboutbeer today to learn more and receive 3 free months of Beer 30. In addition to the show, All About Beer has a podcast channel. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and you can listen to shows like the All About Beer podcast with M. Souter and Don Tess and the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Holl. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.